I'm Rachel Rossi. Today I have a tutorial for you on raw edge applique. The project that I'll be working on in the tutorial is able to be found on my blog. The pieces of applique are taken from my timber pattern, and then on my blog is a tutorial on how to create the pillow with the pocket and obviously how to work through the raw edge applique. If you want to check out the tutorial or grab the pattern for yourself, head to www.rachelrossi.design. The supply list for raw edge applique is not very long. You'll need a template that comes with a pattern, heat and bond, scissors, and a pencil. You'll notice one side has ridges on it and the other side is papery. We're going to draw on the paper side. Get out your template and find the pieces that you'd like to trace. Put the template underneath of the fusible web. And if you have trouble seeing through your fusible web, you can use a window or a light box to see through. And then all we're going to do is trace around our shapes. Don't be afraid to make a few mistakes on these tracings, as we will cut out all the shapes later and no one's going to see your pencil markings. I like to label as I go just so we can keep things in order. So there's my headpiece for the bear. I'm going to show you my tracing and how I arrange all of my pieces here as we go. There's no real rhyme or reason, just leave about 1/4 of an inch between all of your shapes at minimum. Now we're just going to cut very generally around each shape. There's no need to be precise or pretty about this, we just need to get each shape cut out. We're going to place our fabric wrong side up and then put our fusible web piece on top of that with the rigid side down. This is nice for fussy cutting because typically you can see through the fusible web and get it just like you want it. Now I'm just going to press on top. You can press right on top of the fusible web. Just make sure you're on the paper side. And give a nice slow iron. If you go too quickly, the fusible web does not have time to release into the fabric. So take your time. As you can see, it's pretty well stuck on there, so now we can cut. So I'm just cutting right along the lines that I drew. This is the beauty of raw edge applique, is that I can just cut it exactly how I want it and know that that's what it's going to look like. So take your time and get a nice cut, because this is part of what makes it look really nice when you finish up. See how I can see through right there? So what I'm going to do is actually double up my fabric, and to make that easier, I'm going to grab a second piece of fusible web and fuse 2 pieces of white fabric together. So here I'm just going to cut out a square of fusible web that's larger than the piece of applique, the head that I'm cutting out. So I'm just cutting this out. It doesn't have to be pretty because we're going to cut out precisely later. And I'm just going to sandwich that between 2 pieces of white fabric. So just like we did before, I'm going to fuse this onto one side of my white fabric, the wrong side. Give a nice slow iron. You don't need to hurry here. Once I'm sure that that's on, I'm just going to peel the fusible web away. And it's hard to see here, but it is a little bit tacky. It's not really sticky, so you do have room to move around a little bit to get things nice and flat. And I'm just going to fold that against itself. Make sure everything's nice and flat before I iron, and then give a nice slow iron and make sure everything's fusing together really nicely in there. This is a great way to work with fabrics that are just a little thin or are showing through, and it does really keep things in place for you. Now that those 2 pieces are fused together, we'll peel off the head fusible web paper just like we did before, iron on, and cut. There we go. Now there's our head, and you won't see the other fabrics through it. Now we're ready to lay everything out and get our bear set up how we like him. This is my background fabric, which I just love, and the pocket is already made. I just went ahead and top stitched the edge. There's a few things to note here as we get set up. You'll see that I'm pulling each piece of paper off the back of the fabric, and then arranging how I'd like. The important part is that I'm actually tucking those ears and eyes behind the piece that comes in front of it. And this matters because it's going to reduce bulk then as we stitch, as long as we stitch in order and kind of plan out what we're going to be working on and when. So now everything's ready. I can move his little pocket and I'm going to iron everything into place. I already peeled off the papers, so things are kind of just laying in place there, and I'm just going to very carefully iron things on. I like to press at first so that I don't move any pieces around, and then I'll go through and iron the back as well. So we are ready to sew. I'm using black thread, a Microtex needle, and an open embroidery foot for my Bernina machine, but you can just use any wide foot. And with a wide foot, you're going to want to use a wide stitch plate. I have my stitch set on zigzag, and I like them to be wide. That is totally up to you, but I have mine up to a 5mm width, and I have it down at a 0.5 length. I like my zigzag stitch to be nice and tight, and this is totally personal preference. As I said before, we're going to skip the part where the appliques meet each other and save that for when we do the rest of the head. This will reduce bulk as you do your applique stitches on the ears, the eyes, the nose, and the snout. Then we'll do the white piece to wrap it all up. The important thing to keep in mind here is that your needle on the outside swing is just barely missing your applique piece. So I like to put my needle down first, start with a knot, nice and slowly, there's no rush. You really want this to just align with the edge of your fabric. Putting your needle down first is a very helpful way to kind of get yourself off on a good foot. So just keep that needle kissing the outside edge of your applique and go nice and slow. If you need to stop on a curve, stop on the outside. It'll help you a lot. I suggest this even if you're just stopping to readjust your own hands, because your fabric will always move very slightly. I do a knot again at the end. And there you have your first ear. It looks pretty good. Just followed the outside edge. So we'll trim our threads and move on to the next ear. I'm moving very quickly here. Just remember to go nice and slow. So I'm working my way from back to front. I'm doing the ears first, then the eyes, then the nose. I've changed my threads now to white thread to do the white face. If you want your fabric and your thread to blend together, then do your best to match them as well as you can. There's lots of different styles of applique. You can do different stitches other than zigzag. You can do a blanket stitch or something decorative, and maybe you want that to stand out with a different fabric and a different thread choice. Here we have our little bear face. I went ahead and did his paws already. It's the same technique. So now I can go ahead and put my pillow together. If you enjoyed this tutorial and want the full instructions on how to create the pillow, head on over to www.rachelrossi.design/pocketpillow. Here you can also find more great tutorials, subscribe for updates, and get your copy of the timber quilt pattern. Thanks for watching!